You're watching Story Scroll. Real stories, raw emotions, and endings you'll never forget. Let's scroll into today's tale.
My daughter testified that I was an unfit parent and cost me custody. I thought that was the end of us. I never thought I'd be the kind of parent who'd be writing a post like this. But here we are. My divorce was ugly in the way most divorces are. Lots of resentment, old arguments dug back up, lawyers poking at wounds that never fully healed. Still, for a while, we managed to keep things civil. We agreed on one thing at least. Our daughter deserved better than open warfare between her parents. That illusion shattered the moment custody entered the conversation. My ex wanted full custody. Not primary. Not majority. Full. I wanted shared custody. 50-50. Equal time. Equal responsibility. I wasn't perfect, but I was present. I showed up. I tried. My daughter was 15 at the time, old enough that the court would listen to her, old enough that her words would carry real weight. Everyone told me that. My lawyer, the evaluator, even the judge indirectly. Before all of this, my relationship with my daughter was complicated. Teenagers are complicated. We argued. I was stricter than her mother. I worried more. I didn't always say the right thing, but I loved her. I went to her school events. I helped with homework. I knew her friends' names. I thought that counted for something. My ex, on the other hand, had advantages I couldn't compete with. More money, better lawyers, a nicer house in a better school district. She knew how to present stability, perfect photos, calm demeanor, soft voice in court. Optics mattered, and she had them on lock. When the custody evaluation started, I was nervous but hopeful. The guardian ad litem told us both that our daughter's testimony would matter a lot. I remember nodding, thinking, okay, she'll tell the truth, or at least something close to it. I never once coached her, never hinted at what she should say. I trusted her completely. That was my mistake. The day she testified is burned into my memory. Sitting there, listening to my own child talk about me like I was a stranger. She said I was emotionally unavailable. She said I was unstable. She said I scared her when I got angry. Some of it was rooted in moments I recognized, raised voices during arguments, times I shut down instead of talking. But the way she described it, it was amplified, sharpened, framed in the worst possible light. And then she started using phrases I knew weren't hers. Words and expressions she'd never used before. Things my ex used to say during fights. Things her lawyer leaned forward at, practically salivating. I sat there, frozen, while my ex's attorney took my daughter's words and turned them into a weapon. Every sentence became proof that I was dangerous, unfit, a risk. I wanted to stand up and scream that this wasn't the whole truth. That context mattered. That parenting wasn't a highlight reel of your worst moments. But I couldn't. I had to sit there and take it. When it was over, my daughter wouldn't look at me. Not once. She stared at the table like it might swallow her whole. My ex, though, she smiled, softly, sympathetically, like she was already the winner and wanted credit for being gracious about it. The ruling came quickly. Full custody to my ex. I was granted limited visitation. Supervised at first. The word unfit appeared in the court documents, clinical and devastating. Just like that, my role as a parent was reduced to bullet points and restrictions. The fallout didn't stay in the courtroom. Family members started treating me differently. Friends grew awkwardly distant. At my daughter's school, teachers avoided eye contact when I ran into them. I could feel the story being told about me. The dangerous father, the unstable one. Inside, I was hollow. Shock gave way to grief. Grief to humiliation. It felt like I'd been erased and rewritten by people who never bothered to know the whole story. I sent texts to my daughter that went unanswered. Birthday cards that were never acknowledged. Holiday gifts returned unopened, or worse, not returned at all. My ex told me it was for her mental health, that communication needed to be limited. That space was best. I should respect boundaries. So I did. Or at least I tried. I started therapy because I couldn't sleep. Because every time I closed my eyes, I heard my daughter's voice in that courtroom, saying things about me that didn't feel like they belonged to her. I rebuilt my life quietly. New routines. Fewer expectations. I learned how to live with the idea that my child had chosen a side, and it wasn't mine. I told myself this was the consequence of divorce. That kid's aligned with the parent who seems safer, stronger, easier. I told myself loving her meant letting her go. I was just starting to believe that narrative when everything changed. Last week, on an ordinary evening, my doorbell rang. When I opened the door, my daughter was standing there, with a bag in her hand, and nowhere else to go. Update. I honestly didn't know whether to write this update. Part of me wanted to disappear again, go back to the quiet routine I'd built where hope was kept at arm's length. But a lot has happened, and I think I owe context, if only to myself. When I opened the door that night, my daughter looked different, not just older, heavier somehow, like someone who'd learned too early that safety can be temporary. She was 17 now, taller, quieter, no phone glued to her hand, no eye-rolling sarcasm, just a backpack slung over one shoulder and a duffel bag at her feet. She didn't say hi. She didn't say sorry. She just asked, "Can I come in?" I let her in. Reflex more than decision. She stood in my living room like she didn't recognize it anymore, like it belonged to someone else's life, which in a way it did. Idiradakurata. Simplified. Removed traces of the version of me that thought this house would always be filled with her noise. I offered her water. She nodded. Her hands were shaking. That's when I knew this wasn't a visit. She told me, in pieces at first, what had happened at her mom's house. Things changed after the custody ruling. Not immediately, but fast enough. Once my ex had what she wanted, the tone shifted. Rules became rigid. Curfews moved earlier. Friends were suddenly bad influences. Privacy disappeared. Affection became conditional. My daughter said it felt like she went from being the prize to being the proof. Proof that my ex was the better parent. Proof that she'd won. Anytime my daughter pushed back or showed sadness, it was framed as ingratitude. After everything I did for you, after what your father put me through, she was reminded constantly that she'd chosen the right side. That testifying was brave, that she'd saved herself. And when she stopped playing along, when she cried too much, questioned too often, or mentioned missing me, the warmth vanished completely. Eventually, my ex gave her an ultimatum. Obey the rules without question. Cut contact with toxic influences. Accept that this was her life now. Or leave. My daughter chose to leave. That's how she ended up at my door. We sat at the kitchen table for a long time before the real conversation started. She stared at her hands like she was preparing to confess a crime. She told me the truth about her testimony. She'd been coached. Slowly. Carefully. Conversations framed as just venting. Hypotheticals. What would you say if the judge asked? She was pressured, told that if she didn't speak up, she might be forced to live with me full-time. But the court needed to know how unsafe I was. She was promised stability, a better life, less fighting, less stress. She said her mom told her, "This is how we make it stop." And then she said the part that hurt the most. She knew it would hurt me. She knew it might change things forever. But she was terrified of losing her mother. Terrified of being the reason everything fell apart. She thought she was choosing the lesser evil. I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't yell. But I also didn't reach across the table and pull her into a hug like she expected. Because here's the truth I haven't seen many people acknowledge. You can love your child and still be shattered by what they did. Her words didn't just hurt my feelings. They destroyed my life legally. They labeled me. They followed me into court documents, therapy notes, background checks. They changed how people saw me. And she couldn't take that back. She cried when she realized I wasn't going to immediately absolve her. She said she thought I'd understand, that I'd forgive her because I was her dad. I told her I loved her. That part was easy. Trust, though, that was gone. The next day, my ex found out my daughter was with me. She called screaming, accused me of kidnapping, said I was manipulating our daughter again, claimed she never kicked her out, said my daughter ran away because she couldn't handle rules. When I mentioned the ultimatum, she laughed and told me I was delusional, and she threatened to call the police if I didn't bring her back immediately. That's when reality hit. The custody order still stood. Legally, I was on thin ice. I called my lawyer in a panic, explained everything, asked what my options were. He was blunt. The court record doesn't care about late truth. My daughter's testimony was permanent. Reopening the case would be expensive, emotionally brutal, and far from guaranteed to succeed. And if my ex pushed the issue, I could be accused of violating the custody agreement, even if my daughter came willingly. I was helping her, but I was also putting myself at risk. So I made boundaries. Immediately, I told my daughter she could stay for now, that I wouldn't turn her away. But this wasn't a reset button. This didn't erase what happened. And it didn't mean things would go back to how they were. We take it slow. Therapy, together and separately. Clear rules. Transparency. She was stunned. She said she thought coming back meant everything would be okay again. I told her I hope someday it might be, but hope doesn't rewrite history. She's been here a few weeks now. Quiet, polite, almost afraid to take up space. I catch her watching me sometimes, like she's trying to figure out if I'm still the monster she described, or the parent she lost. I don't know if letting her stay is the right decision. I don't know if I'm protecting her or opening myself up to be hurt all over again. All I know is this. Court labels don't vanish just because the truth shows up late. And love doesn't mean pretending betrayal never happened. Final update. It's been several months since my daughter showed up at my door with a bag and nowhere else to go. I didn't update sooner because, honestly, I didn't know how this story would end, or if it even had an ending yet. Things are quieter now. Not perfect, just steadier. My daughter is calmer. Therapy has helped, both individual sessions for her and joint sessions for us. She's learning how to name her feelings without turning them into weapons. I'm learning how to listen without collapsing inward or snapping shut. We're not close in the way people expect a parent and child to be after a reunion. There's no movie-style healing montage. No sudden warmth that fixes everything. But there is honesty, and that's new. Over time, more of the truth came out. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Just small admissions that piled up until the full picture was impossible to ignore. She showed me messages from her mom, texts that were framed as concern but clearly guided her testimony, suggestions about what to emphasize, reminders about how serious court was, warnings about what might happen if she didn't speak up, emails too, sent late at night, long paragraphs about sacrifice and loyalty, about how telling the truth meant choosing the parent who actually fought for her. My daughter admitted she'd hidden parts of this from me before. She said she was afraid that if she told me everything, I'd shut down completely, or worse, ask her to fix it. Our therapist called it what it was, emotional manipulation. Not the cartoon villain kind, but the slow, steady kind that makes a kid believe they're responsible for adult outcomes. Hearing that didn't feel like vindication. It felt like grief. Some family members finally came around after seeing the messages themselves. A few apologized. Most didn't, but their tone changed. Less certainty. Fewer assumptions. As for the legal side of things, I made a decision. I'm not reopening custody. I could try. I have evidence now. Messages. Professional validation. A daughter who would testify very differently today. But I'm tired. Tired of courts that reduce entire lives into checkboxes. Tired of reliving the worst moments of my parenting on record. Tired of chasing a version of justice that might never come. My lawyer was honest with me. Even with new information, there was no guarantee the ruling would change. And the emotional cost, to me and to my daughter, would be massive. So I chose peace over revenge. That doesn't mean my ex faced no consequences. Without a courtroom battle, the fallout was quieter, but real. My daughter went low contact with her. Not out of anger, but self-preservation. Family gatherings became awkward. People asked questions my ex couldn't deflect forever. The narrative she'd built started cracking under its own weight. No one publicly condemned her. No dramatic exposure. Just distance. And sometimes that's worse. As for my daughter and me, we had a long, painful conversation about boundaries. I told her I wasn't disowning her. I wasn't punishing her, but I wasn't pretending either. I told her that love doesn't erase consequences. That trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild, and sometimes never fully returns. That what she did had permanent effects on my life, even if she was a child when she did it. She cried. I cried too, eventually, but I didn't take responsibility for her guilt. That part mattered. We're rebuilding something now. Slowly. Carefully. Like people who know the ground can collapse if they move too fast. And me? I've stopped defining myself by a court document. For a long time, unfit echoed in my head like a verdict on my entire existence. Every mistake felt like proof. Every doubt reinforced the label. That voice is quieter now. I know who I am. I know what I did wrong and what I didn't. I know that being imperfect doesn't make someone abusive, and being betrayed doesn't make someone weak. I've also learned something uncomfortable but important. Children can cause irreversible harm. Not because they're evil, but because they're human, scared, and influenced by forces they don't understand yet. Acknowledging that doesn't mean withholding love. It means refusing to lie about reality. I lost custody. I didn't win in court, but I kept my integrity. I didn't rewrite my truth to make others comfortable. I didn't chase a hollow victory just to prove a point. I chose honesty over performance, boundaries over bitterness. Forgiveness, I've learned, is a choice, not an obligation. And sometimes, forgiveness looks less like absolution and more like distance, clarity, and self-respect. If nothing else, that's something no judge can take away from me.
Thanks for watching Story Scroll. Hit that bell and stay tuned for the next story that will move your heart.